first of all, your life and career. So I believe you were born twins.
Yeah, that's right. I was born 45 minutes after my brother, and then spent the next 20-odd years trying to catch up. And see, the thing was, he passed the 11 plus and went to a grammar school around the corner, while I failed mine and went to a secondary modern school about 2 miles away. So every morning I ended up having to walk all the way to school. Gave me time to think, I suppose, but I remember playing a parlour game with friends of my parents. Where you thought of someone you admired and gave the initials, and they had to guess who it was. I offered IN, and my brother got more and more agitated and frustrated by the whole thing, and eventually everyone gave up. I just said Isaac Newton, and I remember on the way home in the car, my mother turning around to me and saying how proud she was of me. And that's the first time I felt, I had a lot of praise, because I hadn't, achieved what they wanted, and my brother was beating me all the time. Anyway, then took the 13 plus, the overage one, to get into the grammar school. The night before the exam, my brother gave me some tuition on English, which is my worst subject, on the part of speech. And there's a whole section of it in the exam, and I passed. So I went to the grammar school with my brother, but since I had never done any French, I ended up with being 1 year behind. So in 13 years, I managed to get 1 year and 45 minutes behind now. So anyway, my best subject at school was physics, actually, and I left with 3 A levels, and physics, pure maths and applied maths, very common ones. But I heard that the headmaster he had a meeting with all the teachers in the school when they did the references for the pupils. And when they came around to me and my name came up, his first question was, "Who's he?" So obviously I made I left with a lasting impression, I think. I found out with one, but I chose to do an apprenticeship in here where I live at GCAEI, which leads to a degree from Portsmouth University. And I got paid as well, which was the advantage of it. I remember every Thursday into the entrance hall and getting my pay slip. It was quite enjoyable, that bit. But also I was in the spacecraft industry by the time, and I finished with a first class honours degree in electrical engineering, and my first job was designing elements of a Prospero satellite that was actually launched on the first British launcher, Black Arrow. But the strange thing about it is 3 days before the launch, the government cancelled the contract. We carried on in the hope it would work. And, unfortunately, I didn't go to Australia for the launch because I was working on another satellite. And a friend and colleague of mine, the project's radio expert, he built an 8 feet long helical aerial from his own, calculations and volition. So on the satellite's first pass, he was sitting on the roof of the factory on a swivel chair, tuning into the data coming in, while I was below in the clean room with test equipment, decoding the signals. And we got some signals, but they were weird. An antenna had been knocked off the satellite when the third stage had reignited after separation and then hit the satellite. The signal strength was pulsating, but I managed to play around with the signal and decode the data. And we ended up informing the ground station at Farnborough that all the systems were working and everything was fine, apart from the aerial, of course. It was a bit of a coup for us, because apparently they hadn't managed to decode any data on their first pass. So, Heath Robinson rides again. That night, on the news that night, the Black Arrow had successfully been launched. Much to my surprise, my brother turned turned around to me and congratulated me. He said, when was he ever going to have something on the news, and that he'd done. Because he had actually followed my father into accountancy, so there was not much chance of that. Anyway, years later, it was his own son that proved him wrong when he did something astounding. Anyway, the next satellite I was working on was actually a astronomical X-ray satellite, and it was actually designed by, or the experiment was designed by Bristol University. And I often wonder whether, if I'd taken up their offer to study there, I would have ended up on the other side of that project. Anyway, so after about 11 years, I left GC Space Group and eventually became head of research at Smith Industries in Basingstoke. But I didn't get much support from the chief engineer there, and I ended up finding another position in Sperry in Bristol. Unfortunately, after a few years, that company closed down. I was out of work.
I mean, it was an exciting time for Britain at the time, wasn't it? Because we were making quite a few of our own aircraft and space industry, which we don't now. That must have been horrifying at the time too.
Yes, it was. We could see the contraction of the whole thing. With Black Arrow being cancelled meant that we had no launches. All the launches were then done, either with the Russians at first and then with the ESA, of course. But now, of course, we've actually come out of that with Brexit. So our involvement is getting less and less even now.
Yeah.
It's sad, really, yeah. Well, I decided I wanted to see if I could change, and I went to a career advisors. And I went up into London and had a whole day worth of tests. And they were basically came to the conclusion I was better off in the rut I was in. Because they claimed that software was a young man's game. I was 37 then, I think. So I was obviously quite too old for that. But what happened before that, a few months before my wife had given me as 81 for my birthday. Wondering what to do with it, I wrote an album design mazes. But then I made it into 3D to make it more interesting. You could actually walk around it. Now, I mentioned this to an acquaintance who said he was actually selling computer games and suggested that perhaps I put a monster in it. You have to turn it into a game. So that's what I did. And it turned out to be the first 3D computer game, 3D Monster Maze. Not having seen any games apart from those supplied on X81, had nothing to compare it with at all, anyway.
Well, when I was a little kid, I did an X81, so I was about 12, I think. I saw 3D Monster Maze and I was mesmerised by it. What was different about it, I think, was that there was actual tension. There was a lot of tension because there was no sound, obviously, but it was saying that you could hear footsteps getting closer and closer, and when you got backed into an alleyway or dead end, there was genuine terror.
Yes, I remember while I was developing it, I was obviously playing it to test it, and at one point I had none of those messages on there to start off with, and I remember jumping out of my skin when suddenly the monster turned up, and my wife, who was sleeping, because I was working in the bedroom at the time, my wife, who was trying to sleep, burst out laughing when she saw me jump. I realised there was quite a bit of tension coming, and that's why I started putting in the messages, and also the caption at the beginning where it says something about you enter at your own risk.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought, God, if it has that effect on me, what about some poor old guy like me now, and end up having a heart attack?
How did you do the graphics on that? Because, I mean, you must have used the keyboard graphics. Did you plan them on graph paper when you drew them?
the initial ones. The ones with the monster coming towards you. Because I sketched a monster and then enlarged it until it filled the screen. It was the later ones when I did more on the, on graph paper. Later games, because that was very blocky, because that was all that ZX81 gave us, wasn't it?
Yeah. So how did you go about getting that marketed? Because how did you go from the bedroom to marketing the game?
Oh, well, the guy I met was John Gray. He suggested we went into partnership. Of course, I was out of work. And foolishly I agreed. Anyway, we started only doing mail order, but then it spread to the small independent shops. And we produced all the tapes by hand, and my wife and I did all the dispatching each morning. Anyway, the Three Monster Mates was seen by W.H. Smith's buyer, John Rowland, at London Computer Fair. And he invited me along to see him. And I managed to do a deal for £125,000 worth of tapes. And the problem was, of course, financing the duplication. But he recommended a duplicator, offered to guarantee the order, so we didn't need to worry about financing the duplication at all. So, within 3 or 4 months, we were in a different league. Instead of mail order only, we were dealing with orders of tens of thousands.
Wow.
And getting duplicators to do it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny, actually, because I heard later that the industry thought we had orders of over £1 million. Wherever that idea came from. It wasn't me.
How many copies do you think you sold altogether?
I'm not quite sure, because at one time I thought it was about 95,000 of 3D Monster Maze. But my brother, when I mentioned it to him, said, no, it was a lot more than that. But that's all I saw, because I counted them up. And eventually we sold the rights to Virgin for it. And I went through the books, and I only counted about 95, but he reckoned it was a lot more than that. The annoying thing was we had 100, it was carrying on selling, and we had 100 tapes left in a box. And we ended up having, because of the contract with Virgin, I had a contract to destroy all other copies. So we both went down to the local incinerator and watched it burn.
They're probably worth a fortune now, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I haven't got any, unfortunately. Next one was another 3D game, of course. That was 3D Defender, which is a space-based game. He sold that into Smith. But I was also experimenting at the time with what you could do on the single 1K ZX81. And I'd actually come up with a full-screen flicker-free game, because the screen memory is also in that 1K. The buyer couldn't believe it was possible, so I sent it to him, and he said, "Yeah, that's fine, but the thing is, it's so short." And so I said, "Right, how about if we sell it for RRP of say around £2?" Because the other ones at the time were coming up for £5. And he was delighted. He said, pocket money, he said. So we received the first order of 10,000 of them. And that one I know we sold about 22,000 over its lifetime. Because by the time ZX81 had, the Spectrum had come out, of course, no one was really interested much in the ZX81 anyway.
And then it suddenly just changed into new generation. What happened to the J.K. Craig thing?
Oh, well, what happened is partnership with John Gray ended because after about 6 months, my wife and I realised he was doing very little to promote the company. Even though he was supposed to be the marketing manager, I was actually doing all that part. My wife and I were working about 15 hours a day together, doing all the mundane jobs like mail order, shipping, and programming games. we worked at his flat in the morning, but we seldom saw him. And in the afternoon, he never answered his phone. And in fact, it was me that was actually doing all the marketing, and all he was doing was the advertising. When the Spectrum came along, it was inevitable split. It was somewhat acrimonious, unfortunately, and he was demanding 50% of my profits for all my future games and things like that.
Yeah.
But fortunately, what happened then is my brother went into partnership with someone else, a friend of his, holiday park in North Wales, and unfortunately that partnership split, and he then got an interim job as basically deputy manager of Burberry's in London. But he tried to start another business up and was having difficulty. So it seemed natural to us that we actually joined up. Him with an accountancy background and business, and me with the technical side.
Right.
So that's what we did do. And of course, his first task was to sort out the John Gray problem. And what he actually did is to agree, for him and I, for a year, we would market our own games, and just at the end of that year, divide up, the profits in 50-50. But we were to use our best endeavours. What actually happened was John Gray put in a manager and to do his part, and swanned off to Greece for the year. And of course, Rod promoted the new company, New Generation Software. But by the end of the year, the profits of my games had fallen by 15%, whereas his had fallen to 15%. So they obviously didn't have a leg to stand on when he came back, because he hadn't used his best endeavours.
Yeah.
Because he just swanned off. So anyway, that sorted that one out. We were certainly more professional than he ever was.
Yeah. How did you get to grips with the new computer? Because obviously it had sound and it had colour that you had to be really careful about, because of the attribute clash. How long did it take you to really get to grips with it and the different way of coding it?
I think all the time I was programming it, actually. Because quickly realised that I couldn't do a 3D monster maze because it wasn't quick enough, because it was the same processor and the same thing, but all the graphics took far longer to do. So, first of all, let's say a perspective game, Escape, which was like you used bits of a 3D monster maze, and had other features in it, and that was just to get things going. And I actually ended up taking it to Smith's, to see what they thought of it. And he was a bit disappointed. I think he wanted a 3D monster maze, but I pointed out it couldn't be done, sort of thing. Not at the moment. I've got to do a lot more work trying to get it finally, cut down the amount of work that was required by the software. But anyway, he ordered some. So I went to the duplicators in the afternoon, and he kept on ringing. The order for 500 units slowly drifted up to 5,000 units. By the time I got back home, it was at 10,000. He said, everyone's been playing the game in the office, and we like it so much. We want. He did a 10,000 order in the end. So anyway, that was the first one we did. Each of the games was really an experiment to see what I could achieve on the new machine. Yeah.
What I liked about your games as well was the use of just using the paper colour squares that were cycling colours to show movement. It was a clever way of doing it.
Yeah, well, not in 3D was the first one that I did with using that technique, so you could actually follow the snakes they went around, but they were just blocks again. So it was just colour, but that meant I could actually go pretty fast then. Because the other thing with the Spectrum, the one advantage with the Z81, it was you could switch the screen start address, so you could set up a picture and then just flick it across to the new picture, so you could do it without any flickering. But on the Spectrum, of course, you had to do it all in the time slot of one frame. Else it would it always started flickering. That's one thing I never had in any of my games. That's the thing with flickering.
Yeah. Whereas
most other games, I think, had it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Ubiquitous, I think, one reviewer said.
Well, going back to the artwork again, because that was really impressive. I know you said that your best subject was physics, but did you have any art training at all? Because you drew all your own graphics, didn't you?
Yes, well, I did manage to get art O-level. But it was... I didn't have any art training at all, let's put it that way. I had a picture at the front of Travels with Trashman. There was a photograph I had of Luton Airport.
Right.
And so I, with an aircraft taking off, so I put that and then put the dust cart in place of the aircraft. With wings. So that was just a fiddling of things. But it was mainly just crude pictures, and they seemed to work, if it was things like on Trashman, you had the things moving around, then I did draw those on paper and then played around with them, just got them so they'd look right to me. But but no, I didn't have any art training at all. I thought it showed, actually.
No, I was really impressed. So how did you code on the Spectrum? Or did you have a second machine that you ported from?
Yes. On the Z81, I started doing everything on the ZX81, but then I bought a Sharp, and so I did cross-compiling on the Sharp and download it into the ZX81, and then the Spectrum as well. It had the advantage, of course, when the thing crashed, you set it all up again and started off very quickly. But I didn't actually use a decoder on it, or a debugger, I should say. Actually just poured over the software and decoded it that way, which means you actually understand it, and you find things you actually find faults that you didn't realise you hadn't actually seen. I found that it was the best way of testing, actually.
And you tried a different technique to improve security on 3D Tunnel, didn't you?
Yeah, because there was lots of problems with
piracy. Yeah.
That was the word. What was called now. We tried a commercial method, which actually just rounded off signal on the tape. So you could only do one. You couldn't actually duplicate it, but we had a call from Smith and said that their returns rate on that game had gone up to 1%. It was normally set about 0.1, 0.2, something like that.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to look at it, so I looked at it and found that the recorder that the Smiths were recommending for it was the worst one they could have possibly chosen. I found that if that wasn't the easiest way to do it was actually for them to put the tape out again. There was a good chance that the next person had a different recorder to do it on. And we had no problems after that, but that we didn't use that method again, actually. But we didn't want to go right the way through and remaster the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was just unfortunate. Smiths were happy with it, so that's fine.
Going back to 3D Monster Maze, so Corridors of Genon, was that your attempt to actually try to do 3D Monster Maze, but in a sort of a round maze, wasn't it, rather than a square maze?
Yeah. Yeah, because it was to try and find out how, Tunnel, of course, worked out how I could draw large things. The reason for the round thing is that you don't have to change much on the screen to advance the field of view. So I could do that reasonably smoothly. But the monsters, or bogles as I call them, chasing you, still pretty small. I felt they should have been bigger. It was only when they actually caught you that they actually got big and their snouts came up and you were bogleized. And you know what that is, don't you?
But it blew a fireball at you, didn't it, out of its nose, from what I remember?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah, it was supposed to be, blowing his nose, let's say.
Oh, I see. Right, I got you.
That's why it's called bogle.
How did Trashman come about? Because obviously that was a massive hit, wasn't it?
We had a marketing company to market the games, and their first meeting with us, they actually asked, what have we actually got on the books? And I said, honestly, we hadn't a clue. And so they commented and saying that all the kids wanted today was crap and rubbish. After they left, Brother said to me, there you are, what we need is crap. I went to see what would come out, and first thoughts had already been turned into a game, believe it or not. My next guess was at cleaning up space junk. And then the third one was the job of a dustman. I ended up with lots of ideas coming out of that, so I thought, right, that's the way to go. We were going to call it Dustman, and then Rod found out there was already a game called Dustman, and knowing the publishers, we decided not to, that we had to change it, because we knew they'd sued other people for using their names, and so that's why it changed to Trashman. And then when we brought ours out, there was a worried publisher rang us to say that they'd come out with a book of games listings, and one of them was called Trashman. But Rod approached it in a different way. He basically said, yeah, we're happy with that, so long as you make sure that no one would think it was one of our games. Was our game. So they added the comment, not the brilliant game by New Generation Software of the same name, Problem Solved. And we got free advertising with it as well, of course. Because every book had this on the front, not on the front cover, on the index and in the actual book itself. Anyway, the marketing guys, they were quite good at commenting on things. They were watch playing the game, commented that there's no games that onlookers gave a chance of onlookers to get involved.
Yeah.
So that's why I put the Trashman having to get his tips.
Yeah.
So, because when you're playing it, you haven't got time to look what the thing is. But I just thought that would be a nice point to do that, and have the marketing people do thing. Anyway, yes.
Well, you tried a different type of security on Trashman, didn't you? Because obviously piracy was becoming a bit of a problem, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's still a problem. So what we actually did is what I called my technique of being dragged through a hedge backwards. What I actually did is put the normal Sinclair loader in there, but unbeknownst to anyone looking at it, they didn't realise that at the beginning of the line, not displayed, was where the next line was. In fact, the next line wasn't the next line down. It was actually so it actually in one of the hedges on there, there's the actual code for actually the loader. What it actually did is modified the loader so it went backwards. it loaded it from the top down.
Yeah.
So on the tape it was put the other way round, so that it all cancelled out.
Right.
But of course, if you just did a tape to tape, you actually use the normal loader on it, it wouldn't actually work. And I remember being rung up by this guy complaining that his version wasn't working, and I listened to his, what were the symptoms, and I said, I'm sorry, but you've got a pirated copy there. And he slammed his phone down on me for some reason. I can't think why.
Did you ever try to get Trashman over to the Amstrad at all?
Yeah, because Amstrad asked us if we could do the conversion. We said, because I was working on other things at the same time. Brother said, well, we can give you the information and you can do it. And so I went there. Much to their surprise, of course, I had flow charts and everything else, and all the code. Because he said normally the ones that we have to convert, they say, yeah, here you are, here's the tape. So they have to decode it all. But anyway, they eventually gave up doing it because they said it was, it wasn't possible. Because again, the graphics different between the two.
Yeah.
And I was doing things like synchronizing to the screen so it didn't flicker and everything else. Anyway, we ended up getting a subcontractor to convert it for us. I was never really happy with it because the graphics look wrong. Because I don't think what they should have done is the aspect ratio of the pixel was different, so the whole thing looked too wide.
Yeah.
So it just didn't look right. But anyway, it sold on the Amstrad. But anyway.
So you had a big hit on your hands. Did you get under pressure to release a follow-up to Trashman pretty soon after that?
Yeah, from Rod. I wanted to go on to other things, and I started doing an adventure game, a 3D adventure game, but that we found was going to take too long. So I did another one, very quick one, and it was called Shoot the Rapids. I wasn't happy with it, and when I saw what some people had done with the cover, I thought, no, I don't like that at all. But anyway, at the same time we had a young programmer with us, Paul Bunn, and he did a version for the Commodore. And so that went out, and I'd always assumed that it went out on the Spectrum, but it was only later on I was going through the books and realised that Rod had never duplicated the Spectrum version, which I was thankful for, really. So that's why we ended up doing Travels with Trashman then.
On to Jonah Barrington Squash. So I remember that being one of the first games with digitised sound.
It was just something that dawned on me that I could actually do the complete sound. But because when I was with Smith, I actually did a A to D converter, analog to digital converter. I could use from a microphone to this converter and straight into the Spectrum.
Yeah.
And record it on there and then play it back.
Yeah.
That's what I did, because it wouldn't have had much time to it and didn't add a lot of memory either.
Yeah.
That's what I tried to do, but when that came out, that was rather awkward because one of the clauses in when I came to clauses of or conditions of the Guild of Software Houses is that you should always meet your delivery dates. And we'd given the industry a date for some deliveries for Jonah Barrington Squash. And I had the weekend to actually put the whole thing in and get it working, as it turned out. But I got it in, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as it could be. And what I discovered was that all that was happening was the attack of the sound was wrong. If we'd been able to reduplicate again.
Yeah.
And I would have got it perfect, but unfortunately it wasn't quite right. The beginning of the words are always slightly wrong, or the beginning of the messages, I should say, was slightly wrong. It was quite interesting. But one of the things was that I ended up having to write it. So it was, some reviewer said that they'd actually gone into it to decode it, and it was absolute gibberish. Couldn't understand it. And in fact, what actually happened, I found I couldn't. The computer wasn't quick enough to get a high sample rate, so you didn't hear a whistle. What I actually did is you put lines of gibberish code that did nothing, but ended up, it lasted a certain length of time, and you just went to the top of that and then down, and by the time you got to the end of it, you could timed out something, or one or naught, and so you could actually get it a hell of a lot faster.
Yeah.
And that's what was actually happening. So it was declared gibberish. Yeah.
How much did you get involved with Guild of Software Protection?
Software houses.
Software houses, sorry. Yeah.
Well, we were actually one of the founder members of it. So we saw it from the very beginning and helped draw up the code of practice and everything else. And Rod was actually the financial, he dealt with all the finances of the guild.
Right, I see.
And he was there right way through to the end when when the business got bigger than the guild, because we were looking after primarily the small companies.
Yeah.
But in the end, all the big companies were actually in there.
When did the doors finally close on New Generation then, and what happened there?
Well, eventually got to the point where we thought, we were being taken over by, or beaten, I should say, by companies that were pouring masses of money into it, and we couldn't actually afford that. So we actually sold all the rights to Virgin,
right.
Virgin Games. So they took over, and we, it seems funny now thinking about it. They're saying we haven't got enough money to do the games, but it gave us enough money to build a portable computer. This is about 86, something like that.
Wow, way ahead of its time.
And it had a touch screen on it as well, which was completely new. And it was designed to take round to, for furniture designers, like kitchens and bedrooms and things like that, to actually go and sell their wares, so they could design in front of the customer the kitchen there and then, and end up telling them what the price is and everything else, and modifying it, so they could actually sell it. And we had a guy who was selling this computer, and we did it for Schreiber and another one which I can't remember now. Anyway, Sideline was actually selling this kitchen stuff, not Schreiber's. But he went round and he said every time he walked in with this thing, he would guarantee a sale. He said it because people were happy to play around with it and sort out what they wanted, where they wanted it, and it was so easy because in about 5 minutes you could move things around to exactly where you wanted, and it would actually come out with a cost of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so we were doing well with that, but I think we sold about 31, 32, something like that.
Yeah.
Before we ended up, having cash flow problems because it was just taking longer and longer before we got feedback from the company. Annoyingly, on the day we've got receivers in, would you believe Wren Kitchens, who's still going now, They actually asked us to go in and show our system to them.
Right.
But we had to say, do you want to buy the company? And they said no. yeah. But anyway, it was basically just ahead of its time. I think that's what the problem was.
Yeah. So what happened after all that?
Then got a job at GEC Avionics on video recording. That was in Bristol, and they were then bought out by ABB and closed down. So again, I was out of work, but not for very long. I was invited to by a chief engineer at Sperry's, who was at Sperry's, and then joined BAE Space Systems, to go in with them. So that's what I did do.
Yeah.
It was around about that time that unfortunately Rod died of cancer. He was only 50 at the time.
Right.
It was, anyway, quite a sad time.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was with, so I went to back into space then, dealing with satellite hardware for NBSat, which was a huge, as big as a bus, ESA environmental satellite. It went around even measuring wave height and things like that.
Right.
And it was only because of NBSat apparently that, I don't know what they call them now, the waves that are 100 metres high or something.
Oh, the tsunamis. Sorry.
Been sinking boats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've forgotten what they're called now. But they were first proved to exist by NBSat actually. So that was quite interesting. And then I got more and more involved in software. BAE Space Systems closed down in Bristol.
Right.
So I was out of work again at that point, and unfortunately my wife died. But I then got a job at Science Systems. It was purely a software company, and it just so happened that the new onboard space software manager was a friend of mine, and I went for an interview with his manager, and the manager said, "Look, don't worry, you've got the job." So I kept on saying, what I'd done. He said, "Don't bother." So I got the job anyway. So then I worked on the first job as the project manager or technical manager of where it was for Cryosat, which was a satellite to measure the thickness of the ice of on the Earth's poles. And unfortunately, that where it went up, but unfortunately it didn't separate from the Russian rocket and ended up crashing into the ice. And but there's a second one done, and that's come up with conclusive proof. That the ice is getting thinner and thinner at the poles.
Yeah.
So, and finally, I did some software for a graphics library, which was a lot faster and used less memory than conventional imagery software. And the library actually went on to Beagle 2. You remember that? Unfortunately, crash landed on Mars. One of the solar panels didn't open and ended up blocking view of everything. And also doing some other graphics for balloons to be flown over the surface of Mars and to slowly get 3D maps of the terrain and collect geological data as well and things like that. Yeah, at the end of my career, and I retired at that point. Okay. Yeah, so that was I was 65 then. I shan't tell you where I am at the moment. Yeah, anyway, sorry.
Well, you took up writing, didn't you, as well after that?
Yeah, even before my wife died.
Yeah.
I took up creative writing, and I was writing for about 12 years, and I had 4 short stories published and a mention on TV, and then after I retired, I started and self-published a travel book about New Zealand.
Yeah.
The interesting thing was, if you Google the book's title, the first 2 entries listed were pirated versions of the e-book.
No.
The publisher said they'd never had any books pirated before. Not quite sure whether they were trying to congratulate me or what. I'm pretty sure that the pirates sold more than I did anyway. But anyway, that's it.
Well, you're still interested in physics, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just working on a theory at the moment that electromagnetic particles are electromagnetic and it's infinite in size.
Yeah.
And it does answer a lot of physics questions that nothing seems to answer at the moment, and puts it logically together.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I've been trying to do.
Well, thanks again for the interview. It's been fascinating. Thank you for this. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for all the great games as well. I mean, you were a large part of my childhood, believe it or not. Thank you for that.
Makes me feel very old.